Hey honey badgers, it's been a minute since I've done a whip and chat with you guys or much of anything on this channel. Still been dealing a little bit with that fatigue and joint stuff. I was saving, like I told you I probably would. I got to this point over here on the Josephine Wall canvas, and I was saving the face square for the main girl. I was saving that for you guys to do a whip and chat with. But I thought I would do just kind of a quick overview here of what we got so far. So we've got, I thought this was like a lady by like a candlestick, but I looked at the original artwork and there's actually like two ladies here, and then one I think is kind of kneeling or something over here. And then there's, I think, supposed to be an angel up in here, and then there's some people over here, and then this guy and this woman kneeling in front of him. So yeah, the background people on this are coming out kind of blurry. I'm working on this and I'm thinking, you know, when I first opened this and I said I felt like the number of colors was a little bit small for the size of this, I think I'm still standing by that. Once I get this current row that I'm on now, once I get that done, I mean, I'm pretty much halfway done with the canvas. And at this point, I'm thinking, like, I'm not displeased with it, and it shows up pretty good in the camera. In person, when you look at it up close, there's a lot of fadedness to it, but you do see some more detail come out as you back up from it. But I do think this, so far, my perception of this is that it would have benefited from maybe at least 3 or 4 more colors put in, and then a lot of the fadedness through here, a lot of the detail that could have been there, we might have been able to save some of that with just like even 3 or 4 more colors, I think. And technically, yeah, maybe I could have done it myself with spare drills, but I don't want to do that all the time. I don't mind doing it here and there when there's like a slight color change that needs to be worked out, but when it's like a big old Josephine Wall project, I kind of want to just work on it as is and hope that it's pretty good. So that's where we are with the Josephine Wall canvas. So tonight I'm going to work on the face square while I talk to you guys. I meant to do this video a little bit earlier in the day, but the girl needed a nap. And I'm trying to get this situated. So actually I'm going to turn this sideways. I know I did a video a while back where I said I was probably going to do this on my kitchen table setup. The issue I ran into is that the what do you call it, the holder for the phone I have, it's not really a tripod, it attaches to tables and things. It's got like a clamp on the side of it. It works all right for my desk in here. On my kitchen table out there, the way my kitchen table is designed, you know, it has like sort of rounded off wooden edging. It doesn't, I can get it on there, but it doesn't clamp as well to the kitchen table out there because of the way the edging is rounded. It doesn't have as good of a grasp, so I have to be a lot more careful with how I move when I'm filming out there. So it's a little bit trickier to do whip and chats out there, at least with the bigger canvases, until I figure out something better. It's really hard to find super reliable phone holder over the desk contraptions. I don't know, I'm struggling with words right now, without getting kind of expensive. But yeah, I'm gonna turn this sideways so that I can get to this square a little bit. For those of you that follow me on Instagram, if you saw, I think it was yesterday, pretty sure it was just yesterday, that I posted those 2 canvases. You know, I said I had to refilm this one because I got a notice from Instagram that saying your video just for this one has been blocked in a lot of areas or something like that. It didn't give me like specifics, it just said a lot of areas. And then I was able to find out that it was because of BMG Media. They put a claim on the Springsteen song I originally uploaded for this. So luckily it was sunny yesterday, so I was able to film this one refilm that one and then also do a reel for this one. This is my most recent completion. So I did a reel for that. So if you saw those, hope you enjoyed those, because the sun is gone again. It is back to messy rain and sleet outside. So not sure how long that's gonna go. All right, I think we can settle into the WIP and chat here. I'm gonna try to see if I can I reposition you guys? I don't know. Where are we at? I feel like you guys are on the wrong, there we go. Okay. It's like, I feel like you guys are looking at the wrong square. However, that's a little high up for where I need to work. So let's see if I can bring you down a smidge. See, I'm like standing when I adjust this, and I'm just worried that like I'm gonna sit and then the whole thing is gonna be out of frame. And even with this tripod, it's not really a tripod. Even with this holder right here, it's still a little bit finicky. So we shall try. Okay, let me find all my things I was going to bring into this discussion here while I get set up. For those of you who used to follow me on my old channel, my book channel, that's still technically there. I didn't close down the channel. I did private a lot of the videos just because I'm thinking about revamping some of those videos, and also creating new content over there as much as I can. The reason I had to stop with a lot of the book channel over there is simply because one of the downsides I ran into with the numerous autoimmune things I got going on in my body is that one of them, they don't know for sure, but this is the theory that my doctors and therapists and stuff have, that they think it's tied to my congenital lymphedema. They have a suspicion that some of the lymphatic fluid that got blocked up in my body, it occasionally goes up towards my brainstem and messes with my cognition and you know, coordination and all that kind of stuff that, you know, obviously the brain controls. So one of the things I ran into is that I from time to time have to do like speech therapies and cognition therapies and things like that to try to hold on to brain functioning and stuff. It's not like super extreme right now, but it did affect the way that the skills I used to have for a lot of my critical thinking and book discussions and all that kind of stuff I used to do over on my book channel, because I used to have a background in literature and history and book reviewing and all that kind of stuff. And the more ill I became, the more I started to lose that side of me. And so now I've gotten to where it has really amped up my dyslexia a lot. I got to a point, because a lot of people used to ask, well, how did you get into book reviewing if you're dyslexic? You can find ways around things if you want to do something bad enough and you're passionate about something enough. You can develop coping mechanisms and ways to get around the weak spots in your brain, I guess. So when you see videos and I say I'm struggling with words, it's kind of tied to that. When I get stressed or fatigued or anything like that, if I'm having blockages build up elsewhere in my body, which is also something I have going on currently that I'm trying to lessen, it starts working with my brain. And so I go into all that to say that I backed out of doing a lot of the book stuff because I felt like I couldn't do it the way I used to, and I have a lot of blockages in my speech now and then, and I didn't feel as confident being on camera talking about books because I don't know, I felt like people were going to focus on my loss of words and my speech impediments and things like that. So I got to a point where I was struggling to read at all, and I got rid of a lot of my books. I contemplated like doing a hard purge and just getting rid of all my books, because on one hand they kind of make me sad that it's like an old version of me that I feel like I was forced to let go of. But there are some books that I don't want to let go of. Like, I'm too attached to the authors and just the language and things like that. So I have had books that I try to go back to and try to read little bits of. I have to read much slower than I used to now, but I'm still trying. And so what I thought about doing, partly over here, partly over there, is trying to figure out projects I could do that sort of still incorporate that, still make me feel like I can tap into that old side of me a little bit. Not to the extent that I used to be. I think the extent I used to be is pretty much gone. So I can't, I struggle with like giant books, and I would have to make them like project pieces, you know, when you do like giant canvases here, which I may do here and there if the work feels important enough to me. But yeah, I'm still trying to do a little bit of that content, but I kind of backburnered that channel because I couldn't do it the way I used to anymore. But all that to say, I have been trying to dabble into picking up books again and trying to read here and there. And so with this WIP and Chat, I thought I would talk a little bit about something that I'd been reading recently that had gotten me thinking. Recently, I picked up this is an old copy of this book. I think this was published back in 1980 or something, 79, 80, something like that. You probably best know Madeline L'Engle from the Wrinkle in Time series, sci-fi fantasy series. That was one of the big pivotal series I remember reading as a kid, that got me into that genre. But she's written other stuff, though, as a lot of authors tend to do. They don't. A lot of authors try, I think, not to. Well, artists in general, you try not to be a one-hit wonder. Some people are okay with it, I guess, but I think for the most part, artists don't really want to be a one and done in their career. So she wrote a bunch of other stuff. It didn't really take off quite as much as the Wrinkle in Time series did. That kind of stayed what she was known for. It even says up here, a Wrinkle in Time and a Swiftly Moving Planet author. She also had a lot of nonfiction work she did, and she did essays about her family life, and in this book she talks about just general thoughts she's had regarding just her faith and her art, and how that sort of came together in an unexpected way, because there is a Christianity slant to this. I'm not going to go into the talk for that from that angle. I wanted to talk more in like a general terms. So, you know, if that's not your faith, don't worry about it. I'm not going to harp on that part of it. But she does hit upon some universal topics in here regardless. But if you do pick up this book, just know that going in, that there is a strong Christianity slant to what she's talking about. But saying that, she also starts the book by saying the whole reason she got the idea to do this book in the first place was that she was asked to do this talk or presentation or something. I think she said it was in Australia, I think. Could be wrong, but I feel like that's where she said it was. She was asked to do like a presentation or something like that and talk about her experience as being a Christian artist, a Christian author. And she was sort of taken aback by the request, because she at the time didn't really consider herself specifically in that genre. She looked at it more as like, yes, I'm a Christian, and yes, I write. I didn't think I was a Christian author per se. I don't know, she said, I felt a little bit irritated by that I was sort of being pigeonholed into that, when I just initially I thought they were two separate things. You know, I have this side of me that believes in this faith, and then I have this side of me that likes to write sort of sci-fi fantasy stories. But in this, she kind of started thinking about that, and thinking about how they, you know, where the Venn diagram of all that stuff is. So that's just an overview of that. I'm only about 4 or 5 chapters into that. But she brings up some interesting topics that I thought I would kind of talk about. Because some of it, just like I said, general art world conversation, it does sort of universally ring true or get you thinking regardless of what your faith system is. So let me get set up here. Oh, I guess you guys haven't actually seen me work on this, I don't think, so I thought I would mention that real quick. What I've been doing is when I do these little squares, I basically just knock out one color per bag. Since they're all bagged up, I just pick a number. I usually start with, as I've been doing this, I usually start with the K's and the 3's because that's dark brown and black. So I just knock those out because those are easy to see. And then I just sort of figure it out from there. But yeah, I just pull the numbers out, and then once I'm done with that number, I just sort of chuck it to the side. And then once the square is all done, I put all the bags back in until I want to do another square. And that's basically the system I've been using for this. But this is my homemade cover minder I've used. I think this was like a dry eraser thing that I found at Dollar Tree years ago. I just stuck a magnet on the back of it because I like Horton Here's a Who and other Susie things. Also from the Dollar Tree years ago, I found this Excel cutter. So that's what I've been using for cutting the plastic off. And then I have my straightener in here, and then my multi-placer pen, and then just the colors. So that's sort of my kit. I haven't actually been using the cover minder a lot for this, but I have it in there in case I want to, I guess. So let me get set up here. So let me take the plastic off here. It's a little bit late at night now, so the lighting might not be fantastic, but as I tend to say, I will probably, if I see in editing that it needs it, I'll go ahead and brighten it up. Oh, I don't have any wax in my pen right now. That could be problematic. All right, so in this book, she starts out by saying, basically talking about the importance of what, popular culture now, I guess, would call the concept of me time, making time for me time, you time. One of the things I like in this, in the way she talks about it, though, is she actually calls it being time, like human being, but she means it more in the sense of just making time for yourself, just for the act of just being, just being in your space, not giving yourself time to not have to need anything, not need to be anywhere, not, you just put the pressures of everything aside just for a few minutes. However you do that, if you have time to go walk in the park or go outside, or even if, I don't know if people still do this, I'm sure they do, but like when I was a kid, there was the joke of like the mom that would go hide in the pantry or something for like 5 minutes and, I don't know, drink or eat snack cookies or whatever, whatever your process is. Just anything where you can just sort of sit in the quiet and just acknowledge that the world will be okay for a few minutes if you don't have to be the Superman, Superwoman in the situation. The earth will keep spinning on its axis if you give yourself 10 to 15 minutes to just center and enjoy some quiet and just be. And so the start of the book talks about the importance of that and how, people tend to, I don't know, sort of trivialize that and think that, they tend to act like, wait, hold on, let me get my color sheet over here. They tend to act like you're, I don't know, being selfish or wasteful in some way if you give yourself that time. And it's something that I've touched upon in other videos in this channel, in this series, I guess, of how it seems like such a small thing at first, but it's amazing how when you give yourself that time, how much it strengthens you in other areas of your life. You just, it takes practice. Like you're probably not going to, you could, I guess, but you're probably not going to see immense benefits from the first 2 or 3 times you try it, because you have to get, I think it's just a product of the culture we live in now. You have to get yourself used to being okay in the quiet again, because we live in such a technology based society now where everything is, instant access. A lot of things are instant gratification. We have media constantly at the tips of our fingers. So when you just sit in quiet and you have to sit with your own thoughts, a lot of people out in the world now, and I'm sure it's not new to our society now. I think it's just because of technology and people talking about it more, it seems more prevalent. But, there's a ton of people, probably more people than not, I would say at this point, that are struggling with, various types of anxiety, depression, or all kinds of mental struggles. And that also makes it hard to sit in your quiet. But at the same time, and I'm talking as someone who's had my own struggles with it, there is benefit to it. And yeah, it took me a lot of years of practice to learn to be okay with sitting with my thoughts, because I've experienced a lot of dark things, so it's easy for the little brain demons to go rampant with being like, oh hey, I got a topic for you while you're sitting here doing nothing. And it's, yeah, when you first tap into that, it's a lot of stuff that you don't want to sit with, and you start to go in this protective mode almost mentally of like, I don't want to deal with this. I can't think of this. This doesn't feel good. This can't be right. But if you can get used to that and learn to, not be scared of those things happening, those thoughts, and just let them happen, and acknowledge that you're just sitting in quiet, you're in a safe place, or at least I would hope you'd be doing this in a safe place. Don't make it awkward with like, in the middle of a busy bus or something that's going to irk other people and trigger them. But, I would encourage you to find like some safe, quiet place that you can do this. And just keep reminding yourself, I'm in a safe place. It's just thoughts. They'll pass. And you just keep giving yourself those pep talks, and eventually you get comfortable with it. It does take a while, but that can also be part of the acknowledgement, is you being your own coach, I guess, and saying, hey, it's going to take a while. You're okay. You're doing great. And eventually, when you sit with yourself long enough, if you can become one of those people that can sit with your thoughts, there is a sort of superpower in that, because a lot of people, I would say, don't have that skill currently. There's too much of reliance of, like I said, the gratification and people needing other people's assurances and appreciation and I don't know, social media ass pats or whatever, that people get out of the habit of sitting with hard feelings. I think that's also what makes just human relations in general now kind of difficult, because like I hear all the horror stories people go through. Like I currently don't do dating apps, but I've heard horror stories from people, just perfectly nice people that go in with the best intentions, but you just get the people that are there for a different form of that instant gratification, I guess, where they just want the quick hit of the the one night stand or whatever, the quick hookup, and nobody really wants to hear your hard luck stories. But somehow people still want to try to find their person in the mix of all that, and it's a mess, because I don't, obviously I don't fault people for wanting their person. Everybody wants their person, but I think that you also have to be that person to find that person. You can't just go out in the world and say, I want this perfect romance story or whatever, and then not do your part to, try to be that for somebody else. And so I do put a lot of faith in the idea of, if you want to find the people, and it's not just romance, if you want to find the people that a certain type of people you want in your life, I think part of that is being that type of person. If there's a certain level of commitment and kindness and depth that you want in the people that you want in your inner circle, you have to do your part to be that type of person that would attract those type of people, so that they would want to be around you. I feel like you can't just go out in the world and say, this is the type of person I want, but I'm going to be a miserable, crotchety old person in personality, and think that that's all going to work out and people are going to love being around you if you're going to be the Debbie Downer in the group. No, I think you, as the Buddha saying goes, or was it Buddha? No, not Buddha. Gandhi, sorry. That said, be the light you wish to see in the world. I think there is some truth in that. So in this book, she kind of touches upon that and talks about when you're giving yourself the gift of the time to be comfortable with yourself, be comfortable in your own skin, being happy with your own company and things like that, you intrinsically make yourself stronger for the people that are going to be in your life. And it filters down into all sorts of things. You learn how to be a better critical thinker, and you learn how to navigate emotions better, and you learn to stop being, not stop being, but you learn to be less scared of things. I don't think you ever really stop being scared. I don't care what people say. I don't think that, I'm not scared of anything. Everybody's got something that triggers them. So it's just a matter of how you navigate that. And when you learn to, take care of your soul and treat it like any other friend in your life, it's going to give you a lot of strength that maybe you don't expect right off the bat. She also talks about when you're out here building critical thinking skills, part of art, the thing that is great about art is that if you're doing it for the right reasons, because she talks about how yes, the idea of good art versus bad art is subjective, but regardless of what your stance is on that, you should be asking yourself as an artist, regardless of what your medium is, am I doing it for the right reasons? Am I doing it because there is something in my soul I need to get out? Am I doing it because there's a message that I want to share with people? Am I doing it simply because I need to pay the bills? Am I doing it because I like the attention it garners me more than anything else? All of those things are going to play into what your art looks like and how people are going to perceive it. It's all going to show up in there somehow. People are going to be able to see if you're just sort of riding on the coattails of a trend, or if you have a really deep appreciation for what you're doing. And so the nice thing about art is that it's going to question and challenge and encourage, hopefully, your individuality, your sense of purpose, and the importance of, you know, that idea again of being comfortable in your skin. And it's a way to learn to stand your ground and figure out what you believe in, regardless of what people around you are saying. You're going to pursue the art that feeds your soul, and the art that you think is going to benefit the world the most. And every form of art, every level of art is going to have its purpose. You know, one of the quotes she has in this book is, how does she word it? I wrote it down somewhere. She says, stories, no matter, because, you know, keep in mind she's talking about this from a writer's perspective, but you can apply this to any art medium. But she says, stories, no matter how simple, can be vehicles of truth, which I really liked that, because that's an argument we get into a lot when you're talking about art in any form, whether it's books or music or paintings or whatever. Everybody talks about, you know, is it good? Is it cheap? Is it too complicated? Everybody's got their opinion about, you know, this is good art, this is bad art, this is trash. Why would anybody make this? Or, you know, this is real art. People, you know, people don't understand it. It's so complex. And so people, I don't know, I think there's a lot of unnecessary gatekeeping that can happen in the art world. Again, regardless of medium, where people will say that, oh, you're cringe for liking what you like. But you got to think, whatever you like, there's an artist behind it, obviously, that likes it too, because they made it. So whatever you're into, the artist themselves is going to appreciate that you like what they like, and that you saw beauty and value in what they made, regardless of what the masses say, if it's not the popular thing. Because, like, you never really know when you're making art how it's going to affect the person that's going to see it. You don't know how one little thing you put together is going to help them. And so that's why I like that she says that no matter what you're doing, how small it is, there's going to be value, there's going to be truth in it. You're going to reach somebody that needs to hear it in just the way you presented it. I've had this discussion a lot when it's also come to religion and faith and things like that, because I grew up, I think I've mentioned this in other videos, I've grew up with religion in my background, but I also grew up in a family where it was encouraged for you to look into other things if you're curious about it. Let me see what color I want to do here. Let's do the T's, I guess. What is T? 36. Okay, T. Okay. And when I was a kid, for most of my teens, I had a job at this Bible camp that was down the road from me. And during the summers, it was a traditional Bible camp. It worked a lot like any summer camp, where kids would come in and do all the extracurricular stuff, as far as, like, you know, campfire songs and swimming and trails and all of that. Because you know, I've mentioned growing up in San Diego County, but I grew up, my primary growing up period was actually way out in the sticks. I just tend to tell people it was in San Diego because that's easier to explain than, I mean, where I grew up, it is in San Diego County, but it's a very small part of it that's actually pretty out there, pretty close to the Mexican border. So it's, rather than explain where that area is out in the hills, it's just easier to tell people, yeah, I grew up in San Diego, because, you know, technically I did. And I, you know, was in the San Diego area. Like, my grandparents lived closer to the downtown area. So I did like grow up out there. But the majority of my raising, I guess, was out in the sticks. And so the camp I worked at had a bunch of like trails, and it was, there were horse ranches in the area and things like that. So when I get it sometimes when I talk to people over, growing up over the years, they've asked, like, you grew up in San Diego, how can you be so familiar with country concepts? Like, if you only saw where I grew up. But yeah, I grew up out there, and I wasn't actually affiliated with any church or anything when I got that job. It was actually a program. It was one of those programs. I don't know if they still do them in schools, but one of those programs you can go through when you're in like junior high school, where you go through these classes where they teach you how to write a resume and how to do job interviews and how to do a handshake and all that kind of stuff, and how to put your best foot forward professionally and all those sorts of things. And then once you complete the course, they have job placement for you as a teenager. And that's how I got that job. Is the woman that runs the class, or ran the class when I was a kid, there was only about, I don't know, 15 or 20 of us in this class. And at the end, she would help us, teach us how to put the resume together and everything, which is kind of funny when you're like 14, 15 years old, because what do you put on a resume at that point? But somehow we figured it out. And, I think a lot of it was like you put like whatever extracurricular activities you were involved in as your sort of experience, I guess. So we built a resume somehow, and then she takes all the resumes and looks at like the areas all these kids live in, and she tries to find you work placement through her connections. So going through all of that process, I somehow got placed as kind of an intern role, I guess. I mean, I was paid, but it felt sort of like an intern role at this camp. And I started out on the landscaping crew. Whole long story with that camp. I ended up being there, like I said, most of my teenage years. I started out on the landscaping crew because I was, this mountain girl that knew how to work the outdoors. And my dad started me out, like, my dad was a Vietnam veteran and was one of those like doomsday prepper type mentalities. So I had kind of an intense childhood growing up. So my dad started me out with rock hiking when I was like, I think my first hike was when I was like 6. He didn't put like an adult pack on me. He started me out with like small packs, but basically he was always very nervous that something bad was going to happen and he would have to move the family. So he wanted us trained to handle moving our things. So yeah, I got like ruck training up in the hills when I was a kid, very early on. And so I had a lot of like outdoorsy experience at that time, even as a kid. And my dad's nickname for me when I was a kid was Billy Goat, because I would just like charge up things, be like, oh yeah, I can get up there. Because I didn't have any fear of heights, really. I had a respect for heights, but I didn't really have fear. I was just like, oh yeah, I'll climb up there. Oh, what, you need me to haul that over here? Yeah, I'll do that. So I went through all that. And so somehow I got placed at this camp, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. Later on in that camp, I got pulled into the directors of the camp's office, and he basically told me, this was my first sort of experience. At that time, I think I had turned 15. It was my first kind of the big experience with sexism in the workplace. He basically told me that I had made the boys on the crew look bad, so he was moving me to the kitchen. No joke. And so I spent a large part of the rest of my time there working in either the kitchen or the front office. Sometimes I would help with the camp counselor duties if they needed a fill-in. So I bounced around all over that camp. But all of that to say, the whole time I was there, I sort of got dubbed the heathen of the camp because I wasn't directly affiliated with any one church there. A lot of the kids that worked there, they had specific churches that had gotten them jobs there, or their pastor knew the director, kind of thing. I don't know. I didn't really have any affiliation like that, but everybody liked me, and I was pretty good at just rolling with whatever. So I got jokingly dubbed sort of the heathen of the camp for that. But that sort of started my discussion that I would get into in various times in my life since then, about how it never really bothered me to be called that, because I always had this concept of, even as a kid, I had this concept that if the message is important, it doesn't really matter about the package. So, and I've refined this idea a little bit from the time I was 15, obviously. I had a different way of saying it when I was a kid, but essentially the message is, I think that I've always had a problem with people that try to say, you're not doing it my way, so you're doing it wrong. And I got that a lot in that, and people tried to be nice about it when I grew up in that environment at the camp, but it still kind of came out every so often. And like I said, I wasn't like mad about it. But I did notice it because I'm a human. There were people that would have that attitude of like, you're not living by my standards, so you're living wrong. And I still hear that. And there are plenty of people that are very vocal about their faith, even in the diamond painting community now. And I still hear it out of them every so often. They phrase it nicely, but the attitude is still sort of there as an undertone of, this is heathen, or this is dark or demonic because I don't agree with it. My church preaches that this is wrong. And so, I don't appreciate that you guys talk about these topics, kind of thing. And it's that same, it's worded maybe differently, but it's that same attitude of like, you're not doing it the way I would do it, so you're doing it wrong. And I don't want that heathenism in my line of sight kind of idea. And I've always been more of, hey, let everybody have whatever platform they want, because you never know. That is one thing that Madeline L'Engle gets into this book about, is the idea that who are you to say where God wants to put his toolbox? Even if it's with somebody that is very vocal about, I don't believe in this faith, I don't follow this. You never know. There could still be a lesson that he puts in the life of that person that is going to speak to you. Even if the person is preaching themselves as a non-believer, he could still find a way. God could still find a way to speak to you through that person. You don't know. You don't know where he's going to put his tools. He's gonna. I think he finds whatever way he needs to get to the people he needs to get to, and it's going to be different for everybody, because everybody has different. I mean, yes, there are commonalities, but everybody has different life experiences on this planet, as far as, our circumstances when we grow up, our circumstances with the schools we attend, or the jobs we work with, or the hard experience we've gone through. Yes, there's commonalities there that we can all relate to, but the specifics are going to be different to each individual. So he's going to have to get to people in whatever way is going to reach them. And you can't reach everybody through the same medium. So that was one idea that I picked up on even back in my teens, and I used to try to explain that, even though I didn't have the same, experience and wording that I would now. Even as a teen, I would try to just laugh it off and explain, in church, they always try to teach you, well, he makes everybody in his image. And so I kind of would jokingly say, I would just point to myself and said, well, he made me in his image, huh? So for whatever reason, the way I am, this is the image he needed me to be of service to the area I was going to be in life. And if I am the way I am, it's because in some way he needed me to be in this package the way I am, so that I could reach the people that he needed me to reach in the area that he needed me to reach them. And maybe I can reach people that would otherwise be turned off by somebody else's method. You don't know. But the same thing could be said for arts. You don't respond to the way one author words something, but you love how somebody else does it. And that author that you really love speaks to you and encourages you and inspires you to pursue your own passions because of something they said, the way they said it. Or, with musicians, nobody is expecting you to like every musician in the exact same way. Everybody's got their favorites. And I think music is one area that is really, it can be really divisive for people, because you get into that whole, oh, you like the popular stuff, oh, those people are sellouts. And it's a stupid argument, because why do you care so much? If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. There are so many thousands of artists around the world. Like, if that's not your thing, like, let people have their thing. It is not hurting you to just change the channel, click out of the video, let people make the art they want to make if they're not hurting anybody. And especially if they're actually maybe benefiting somebody, like, definitely let them do their thing. Like I said, you don't know what audience their particular way of speaking is going to reach. And, how many artists out there have talked about when they've met people who are fans of theirs, and everybody has this hard luck story usually of how, they were in a dark place, but a song came on at just the right time. Like let's see, the tattoo on my arm. You wouldn't know it to look at it right away, but that is actually a music-inspired tattoo. The truck has a different story. It's tied into it, but there are all kinds of different references to musicians that came to me at different points in my life that helped pull me out of a dark place. And I have it on my arm as a constant reminder of, hey, you got through it, and these people helped you do it. And it's also sort of a reminder of, again, that idea of you don't know where the benefit is going to come in. It's sort of a pick me up to myself. When I try to do my own art, I always have that reminder in my peripheral of, when those people were creating those songs, they didn't know you were going to be out there. They didn't know that song was going to hit you at just the right time and take you out of a dark place and get you back on your feet. So you likewise can't say that what you do is not important, because, that is something that I struggle with a lot of times, where if I feel good about something for a minute and then later I'll say, no, this is stupid, this is trivial, it's not going to matter. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing. Like, my brain will try to make that argument sometimes of anything I try. It'll have a moment of like, what's the point? Anybody could do this kind of thing. But then I go back to that idea of what I used to always tell other people is like, you don't know the method in which somebody else might need to hear a certain message. So you might be that person at some point for somebody. So just, if it feels true to you, If it feels like you're coming from a good place, from an honest place, and you genuinely want to help people, just keep making your art. Do it for you. Do it for potentially whoever you might help down the road. Just put it out in the world and make pretty things, make moving things, and remind yourself without embarrassment and without shame that you are important. And, you know, screw anybody that says whatever you're doing is a waste of time or a waste of space, or there's more important things. Especially with the way the world is now, how dark everything can be at times. I don't think there's an argument to say that something is a waste of space if you're out here trying to be one of the small little voices that reminds people of what's worth fighting for and why we should still be passionate about this life, even when it's hard. And yeah, I do know that it's hard. Like, it can suck a lot. But I still have faith in it because I've had plenty of days where it's been amazing, and it doesn't even have to be anything really that moving. Like, you don't have to go have anything really earth-shattering. You don't have to go like backpacking through the Andes or whatever to have those moments. I mean, I'm sure that probably helps if you have the funds and opportunity to do that, but you can have equally moving experiences just by going for a walk at the right time, or having a really great conversation with somebody you're close to. You know, having a beautiful moment with your dog. Like, you don't have to go travel the world to go find the things that make it worthwhile. I think it's mostly, you just have to be willing to be an active participant and have faith in the existence of beautiful things no matter what. At the beginning of this book, one of the things that Madeline L'Engle talks about is, if you think about how we ended up with art in the first place, you know, a lot of it stems from just the primal need to understand who we are as people, why we are the way we are. And if you think about just how basically from the dawn of human existence, and you think about drawings on cave walls through, you know, tribal people telling stories around the campfire, and centuries of art and literature that we've had, you know, all the way up to I don't know, the cheesiest pop songs you can think of. It's all there because we're trying to figure out who we are and why we are and what's important, and, you know, what do we fight for, all of those kind of things. It's all tied into that. We're all out here just trying to make sense of the mess and celebrate all of the good things, like, you know, love and compassion and great moments with our families, or all of those things. Art in general, it becomes a form of communication between all of us. And you've probably seen it online. Even if we don't speak the same language, somehow we can all respond to paintings. We can all dance to the same music, even if we don't understand the words. We all kind of understand the rhythm. Some of us better than others, but whatever. You don't have to be a perfect dancer. Just enjoy the moment. But, you know, it's always great to see those moments where you see people push past, because you see it so much online. There's so many, I don't know, videos and talking heads and all that kind of thing of trying to separate us and say, you know, you're different from me and I'm better than you, and you know, your life experience wouldn't understand my life experience. And there's all of this back and forth about separation of race and men versus women, and the, you know, liberals versus the conservatives or whatever, or all those things that are out here trying to put divides between us. So it's nice when you see those examples of people who aren't afraid to put all of that aside and just be like, hey, we're just having a good moment as human beings. Like, we're not worried about all that other stuff right now. We found the common ground and we're just enjoying having this amazing coexistence moment. And when you see people that are just embracing that with no shame and no division, and you realize that, you know, art was the tie that brought all that together, it's just, yeah, it's important. And I remember as a kid, I don't know how bad it is now in schools, but I remember this started up when I was a kid, the slow sort of fade out of a lot of art programs in my school district. And I remember even as a kid, it broke my heart, because, like, yes, science is important, and having structure and logical thinking and all of that kind of stuff, it is important. Like, you don't want to live completely in fantasy land all of the time, but also you can't live in completely structured, you know, adulting stress mode all of the time either. One of the things that she brings up in this book is that when she first came out with A Wrinkle in Time, she, you know, she said it was pretty well received for the most part, from what she could tell. But every so often she would get these letters from parents who would go to the trouble to write her and say, you know what, I don't care for your stories, and I think I'll just focus on giving my child more instructional reading material. So yeah, best of luck with whatever you're doing over there kind of attitude in these letters, which I thought was funny, because I'm like, why? At first I was thinking, why would somebody waste their time to do that? But then I also think about, you know, you see people online that will say something similar in sort of online speech, where they're like, you know, I was a fan of yours, but now that you've mentioned this, I'm just gonna have to unsubscribe. And it's always weird that they have to make like an announcement about that. It's like, just go. I mean, there have been times where I might be following some artist or musician or online personality or whatever in some way. There are certain, it hasn't happened a lot, but there's been a few instances where there's been people that I had previously been a fan of, but then they had done something that doesn't really align with like my moral code, and it's usually a case of like they got caught up in fame and things went to their head, and now they started kind of acting like a shit to people, something along those lines. And then they did something where I'm just like, oh, that's really messed up. But I never made like a giant announcement of if it just didn't align with who you were anymore. That happens. Like, you know, people grow up, people change what they're into. Like, it's not a big deal if it's not your thing anymore. Because that's also a thing that's happened to me before, is like something I might have liked a few years ago, you know, it ran its course, and now maybe I'm not into it as much anymore, and so I might unfollow somebody like that if they're just, you know, what I liked like maybe 5-10 years ago I find kind of irritating now. It's you know, it happens. And it's not a big deal. Like, you can just You can just quietly exit the room. You don't have to make like a big Olympic speech out of it. But I thought about that. Like, there are people that still do that now, where they're just like, I'm gonna have to unfollow you just so you know, and everyone else knows. And it's just, I thought it was weird. But yeah, she said she would get these people that would say, I just want my kids to have more instructional material to influence them. And one of the points L'Engle brings up is that, yeah, that is important to have that balance, because that's the thing. You want people to be balanced. You want people to have enough structure to be good human beings, responsible human beings. You don't want them forever living in fantasy. But, when I'm reading this, when she's talking about this, I'm reading it and I'm still thinking about the first time I read A Wrinkle in Time. And to act like there's no value in it because it's a fantasy story, there's actually a lot of science that goes into those stories. And even if you didn't pick up on the science, L'Engle also mentions that she got a fan letter from a girl who read the book shortly after it came out. And the girl had mentioned in her letter, I didn't understand everything, but I still got it, what you were trying to say, or something to that effect. And I was thinking, that's kind of, I acknowledge that there was a ton of science in that book that at the time, because I think the first time I read it, I was about 10. And at the time, I didn't understand everything that she was talking about, as far as it's called A Wrinkle in Time. So she's talking about, folds and reality and alternate realities and all that kind of stuff. And granted, at 10, I wasn't that read up on Einstein's theories and all that kind of stuff, and string theory and all that. But I still got the gist of what she was trying to get at with just the story in general. And the story in general is actually a really great family story, as far as, without giving too much away for those who haven't read it. Something happens to, it's been a long time since I've actually read that particular story, but if I remember right, something happens to the dad. I think the dad was involved in some sort of science, if I remember right, had a science background, and he was working on an experiment or something like that. And somehow, like I said, I don't remember the exact details, but somehow he gets sucked into this alternate reality. And it's left with Meg, I think her name was in the story. She's the older girl, and she's got a younger brother, I think. And so they know what or at least they have an idea of what happened to their dad. And they have because they were kind of familiar with his work, they have an idea of how to help him. But, they're kids in the story, so they have a lot of fear of what to do and where to go. But basically, they have to go into this place that their dad was taken into. And the story is basically them trying to figure out, pushing through all their fears and trying to figure out, while helping each other, how to get to their dad and how to fight all these evil characters. And the story is talking about them going through all these trials that eventually help them build faith in themselves, and help them learn their inner strengths and realize that they can do hard things. And yeah, life is scary, but when you have a support system and you have faith in yourself, you'd be surprised what you can bring yourself through and how many people you can help along the way. And I'm just thinking about all those ideas that came up when I was a kid, even when I didn't understand the science of it necessarily. And I'm just thinking, like, this parent over here talking about how she wants her kids to have more instructional materials. Like, how is that not going to help your kid in the real world? Just because it doesn't read like a traditional science book or something. I think it's more helpful to put it in that format, because I think kids and parents alike, nobody wants to be preached at directly. I think it's more helpful to have something in the form of a fantasy story. That was one of the things about stories like The Hobbit and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. There are theological elements that are introduced in those stories, but they're not necessarily shoved down your throat, so they can be embraced by people from all walks of life. Even if you're not a student of that particular theology, the people that are familiar with that, they'll pick up on those trends or those themes and they'll talk about them. But even if that's not your scene, if that's not what you grew up with, you can still enjoy those stories as fantasy stories, as just great adventure stories. And yeah, regardless of your faith, you can still pick up, a good moral lesson here and there. So it's beneficial to a wider variety of people, I think, than having, those materials that directly preach at you and say, this is what you need to believe, and if you don't, then you're screwing up your life, and best of luck to you. Yeah, so I think it's, there's that discussion of, if you go either way to the extreme, it can be detrimental. If you live too much in the sort of frilly art imagination realm, I guess, yeah, it can hinder you in a way, because if you spend too long in the more artistic side, maybe you will struggle with jumping back into reality when you need to, and doing hard adulting things, and having to do the tedious things that come with being a grown-up and having that sort of existence. Regardless of how artistic you find yourself, or your passions or whatever, every so often we're all going to have to go down to the DMV. We all have to sit in doctor's offices. We all have to file our taxes and have phone conversations with companies we don't want to have. Like, those things are just going to happen. And you have to accept that. You can't just live in a fairy world where, oh no, these things don't exist and I will just sprinkle my fairy dust and make it all go away. No, you have to be realistic. But if you are working on art on the flip side of that, it helps you balance out when those harder things happen, or those less fun things happen. It helps you balance out so that you're not one of those raging people where everything is a horrid inconvenience and I can't regulate my feelings to save my life. When you have art, it kind of helps you be like, yeah, it sucks, but it's all right. It's all right. We're going to take a deep breath. Everybody's going to be okay. But also, you can't live in crushing reality too long either. Like, I understand, this is something else that L'Engle brings up too, is like, she, on one hand, she can kind of understand the perspective of the parent, because I don't have kids, but I do understand that as a parent, naturally you want your kids to be as successful as possible in the world. Ideally, I think a parent will want you to be even more successful than they were. They want you to have even more advantages than they did. I think that's, generally the ultimate goal. So she gets why, at least not on some respects, she gets why people like that, those parents who want to argue that their kids need more instructional material. She gets why people say that. But you also can't live in too much of a sterile mindset either, because if all you feed your kids is the instructional stuff, they're going to grow up to just be those rat race kind of people where they think that that's reality. That's just, you're going to crush all of the imagination out of them, and they're just going to think that, well, that's just your duty. You're just supposed to go out and find your little hole in the hive and do your job until you maybe get a retirement if you're lucky, and then you die. You don't want your kids to grow up in that. And I think there are plenty of people in the world that are just sort of, they have grown up in that environment, and they are sort of a victim of that mentality. And yes, people got to pay bills. I'm not arguing that. We should be responsible adults and do our best not to leech off of other people, and try to be as productive and live in a sense of giving back as much as possible. But I don't think there's any argument in that, like, the world is hard. It can be great, but it's hard a lot of times. And when you think of the spike in all of the mental illnesses that are out in the world now, all the people that are constantly struggling with depression and anxiety, and it's a lot of it, I think, has to do with this idea that we've been led to believe that art is trivial and it's nice to have, as a hobby or whatever, or like a quick little feel good, but really you got to grow up and you got to let go of all these things. And I think that's part of the problem, is there's a lot of people that have either been raised or they're raising their kids with this idea of, like, you have to give up things when you get to a certain age to be seen as a respectable adult. Like, the things you liked as a kid, you just need to pack that stuff away and get rid of it and acknowledge that you're a grown-up now, and we don't mess with silly things like that anymore. And I keep thinking, like, talking about, like, the Christian theme behind this. There is one, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but I know there is some sort of biblical quote that I used to get thrown at me a lot when I was a kid, that, I've put away my childish things or something like that. I forget how it's worded now, but it was brought up a lot by, like, the elders in church circles, of, like, that's what's expected of you, is to embrace your responsibilities as an adult. But if you look at a lot of people that live with that mentality, they look miserable in the face. And then they try to make you miserable because you might be over here still indulging your inner child a little bit. And I know that's something that comes up plenty of times in the diamond painting community. I've seen, because I see it I hear it in people's voices sometimes when they do their WIP and chats, their hauls or something like that. I see women who are almost apologetic at times for liking the things they do, and they're like, oh, I know it's a little bit juvenile, but no, it makes me happy. Or, like, girl, so why are you apologizing? Like your things. You're not hurting anybody. If you go home at the end of the day and you like getting into your kittens or unicorns or whatever, and it makes you smile after a long, hard day, do not be apologetic about that. And that's something that I am passionate about, because it always makes me think of when I was a kid. My mom was incredibly hard worker. I grew up in a very poor existence as far as financially. My parents always struggled with money. My dad got to a point where his mental health just completely destroyed the ability for him to hold down a job. And so my mom got to the point where she was working like 3 or 4 jobs to be able to hold down rent so that, we wouldn't be out on the street. And the one thing I remember my mom having a really big passion for is my mom loved love stories. She just loved stories where everybody got their happy ending, and she loved historical romances. She loved the Harlequin romances, all of it. She was just one of those people that wanted everybody to get their happy ending. And so that was her escape. She loved getting up early in the morning and making her coffee and sitting in her chair and reading her little romance stories for like an hour or so every day before the rest of the house got up. And it was something I remember when I was a kid, it was something she always did in secret, because if my dad ever saw it, he used to shame the shit out of her for reading romance novels. And so that was one reason why she used to get up super early, and she would I remember she would sit in this posture where she was kind of huddled in the chair, like she was using her shoulder to sort of hide the book she was reading. And I remember I even did it one time when I was in high school. I remember I had a period where I'd kind of read through all my books, and I needed something to read, in between like my next library trip or whatever. And so my mom, offered, oh, hey, if you want to pick out something from my shelf. And so I remember I was reading, oh man, this is an old school romance novel. I think it was called The Wolf and the Dove, I think. If I can find it, I'll try to put an image up on screen. But I remember it was this like sort of medieval romance or something like, but I got really into it. And I remember I told my dad I was going to be working on my science homework, which I was working on. But like, I remember I was sitting in my room and I was sitting on my bed, and I had my big science textbook in my lap. And I just kept thinking about this story and wanting to know what happened. So I had gotten so used to seeing my mom sneak her romance novels that I had the novel open in my science textbook, and my dad just happened to come in my room, and again he gave me a world of shit for being caught with a romance novel. And I remember having that momentary feeling of feeling ashamed because I was reading a romance novel, and my dad gave me this whole speech about how only women who are really lonely and depressed read those things. and I was thinking like, okay, have you talked to your wife lately? Because this is like her main hobby. But I remember that was kind of like the last time I felt any real shame about it, because I was like, what the fuck ever. And that since then, that's what I've had. I keep thinking back to like growing up with that, and that, so now I'm like really passionate about encouraging everybody. If it's your thing, it's your thing. Don't be ashamed about it. If you're not hurting anybody, I don't care what it is. That's always been my thing. Whatever people do with their life, as long as they're not hurting anybody else, if it involves other people, as long as it's consensual, stay the hell out of other people's business. If it's in the privacy of their home and they're happy and they're living a good life and they're not hurting anybody, it's none of your business. If they want to share it with you, then fine. But otherwise, don't worry about it. Let people be happy. This doesn't concern you. Because I just want people to not be ashamed of what makes them happy. Like I said, if it's not hurting anybody, that's always the caveat I put on anything whenever I give this speech. As long as it's not hurting anybody, and if it involves other people, as long as the understanding is mutual and consensual, don't worry about anybody else. Also, as long as it's legal. I don't want you guys getting in jail or anything. So just to recap, as long as it's legal, as long as you're not hurting anybody, as long as things are consensual and mutual and all that, then you do you, and don't worry about anybody else. And yeah, just embrace it and know that whatever art you're doing, I don't care how simple or complex it is, if you're out there sharing it with the world, if you're putting beautiful things out in the world, it's going to help somebody, and you're going to inspire somebody in some way. It's going to reach the people it needs to reach. Whether it makes you famous or not doesn't really matter. You're going to help people, and you can't be knocked for that. We need as many people as possible, especially now, to be out in the world and helping people and trying to put good out as much as possible to balance the bad, and not be ashamed for that. You are important. You're doing important things. Even if you feel like it's very small scale, I promise you, to someone else, it's not. Your voice and your thoughts and the way you conceptualize the world, it's going to speak to somebody. In my life, I've had people pop up in the most surprising ways at the most surprising times, and usually it's at times where I feel like, man, I am just, because I have those moments plenty of times where I feel good about myself for a little while, and then I have those days where I'm like, man, I am just, that imposter syndrome kicks in, and I'm just like, I am just a waste of space. There are people doing so many more important things than anything I've ever attempted in my life. Like, why am I here? And then it's usually around those times that I will have somebody out of the blue. Sometimes it's somebody I know, sometimes not. I'll have a random conversation, or I'll get an email or a text message or a phone call from somebody, and it might not even be necessarily attached to any work I'm doing, but somewhere in the conversation, something will come up where they'll be like, hey, you said that one thing one time, or, you posted that one thing that one time. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me when you did what you did at the time you did. Or, my mom is gone now, but I used to get that from my mom a lot when I would call her, and she would say, how do you always know when to call me at the most amazing time? And she would tell me that she was just having a really low point in the day, and she's like, you always know when to call me, just when I need to hear somebody's voice the most. And so you never know. You feel like you're not making a difference sometimes, I know, but I promise you, you're reaching somebody in your day-to-day, whether it's online, whether it's somebody you bump into at the store, just somehow, as long as you're putting, good intentions and your whole heart into whatever you're doing, you're gonna reach the audience you need to, whatever your medium is, whatever your format is. And also, it doesn't have to, the other thing to think about is it doesn't have to be traditional art. That's another thing that L'Engle gets into in this book, is that she said, as long as your heart is open to just seeing amazingness in any little thing, like, you can find an art form in anything. Even in more like scientific or medical environments, there can be art forms that can be found in those arenas as well. As long as your heart is in it, your heart is going to come through. And as long as you have good intentions and you want to see, good, bright things happen in the world, and you go forth in life in your work with that intention, at some point it's going to turn around and find you. So yeah, I guess those are just some thoughts that I wanted to talk about. I feel like I've been going on for quite a while now. So I guess I could wrap it up, but yeah, as per usual, this has turned into a big rambly mess, I'm sure, but I'm sure there's some useful nuggets somewhere in there as I edit this down. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with another Whip and Chat, guys, and we will talk soon. Good night, everybody.